So when you get triggered, your autonomic or your involuntary nervous system becomes what we call dysregulated. So I'm using my involuntary nervous system right now to I'm using my voluntary nervous system right now as I talk. As I talk to you, as I move my hands. If you're watching me on YouTube, please subscribe and maybe leave a little comment and like the video and all that good stuff. If you're watching me, I'm moving, I'm talking, I'm doing that. That's my voluntary nervous system. That's something I'm in control of. Voluntary. My involuntary nervous system, I'm not in control of. That's all the stuff, my breathing and my respiration. Well, my breathing, my heart rate, my salivating, my blinking eyes, things that are happening on my digestion from my breakfast this morning. All of those things are happening automatically. They're happening involuntarily. I'm not in control of them necessarily, unless I was Houdini or some magician who could regulate my heart rate and all that. So, and when we say that becomes, so when it's regulated, everything's working normally, everything's working fine. But when it becomes dysregulated, that's when things get hairy. That's when things get crazy. And when you're triggered, your involuntary nervous system gets activated in two different ways. Okay, it gets activated in two different ways. The thing I always tell people to think about is, a plain in Africa where a gazelle would be hanging out, and she's eating. She's regulated. Her nervous system, right? Her involuntary nervous system, everything's working. She's resting. We call it the rest digest. This is when your parasympathetic nervous system is turned on. It's lovely. You feel calm. Everything's good. But then a lioness comes rushing out of the bushes and comes to try to eat her, chases her to eat her. Well, she's no longer regulated, right? That's a scary thing. She becomes dysregulated and her involuntary nervous system takes over. Does that make sense? Makes sense, right? Because she doesn't want to stop and think, I wonder what I should do right now. Wonder what I should think about. She's just going to start, the fight. And we think of this as the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? You can relate to that. Well, the fight or flight response is actually sort of one response, and the freeze response is really separate. And so I'm going to talk about that right now. So when that involuntary nervous system becomes dysregulated, you either get into what we call a hyperarousal state, which is connected to the fight or flight response, or you get into a state of hypoarousal, not hyper. Hyper is kind of up, hypo is down. You get into a state of hypoarousal, which is connected to the freeze response. You get that? So there's actually two ways you go. Depending on who you are, you go up or down. We can kind of call it that way, right? Fight or flight, up, hyperarousal, or down into the freeze response. Now, there's also something I've talked about before on the podcast called the fawn response. Sometimes it's called the fold response, or we say the freeze submit response. Fawning was a term coined by Peter Walker when he talked about complex PTSD. And I speak about that in a whole other episode called Your People Pleasing Might Be a Fawn Response. And again, I will link to that in the show notes, or you can search for it on my website or on whatever platform. So this fawn or fold or freeze submit response, all of these are also connected. So that's all hypoarousal. Although I will say that I've noticed sometimes have a people-pleasing response that could go hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So I have a little argument there with some of the research, but I'll just say that if people-pleasing is an issue for you, it's time to learn about the fawn response and how to have a healthy response instead. So please go listen to that episode, the full episode. Go deep in on that, okay?